Let's see if this time my friend there joins us. How's everybody? Well, if you're looking at this, you're watching this, it's probably you got here through older videos or whatever, on social media. So we do tours here in the ruins of Mexico. Can be any place, but mainly we focus on Chichén Itzá, Tulum, Cobá, Ekbalam. We do places like Yaxuna, Uxmal, and other places. That's what we do here in the Riviera Maya. Hey, there's Jared. How's it going, guys? Hey, Jared, how you doing? Hey, kids, are you watching this? You can communicate through the chat. So please be there on the chat so you can actually ask any questions and let me know when everything is ready. So we're doing live streaming here through YouTube, and we are at Chichén Itzá, Yucatan, and we're hoping that my friends there from Iowa, from Mr. Caesar's class. Okay, is everybody listening? Can everybody listen well? Just check, just please let me know, and we can start. How's everybody? Hey, kids, how you doing? Excelente. So this is Josue, your teacher's friend from Mexico. Here in Mexico we have so many beautiful things to see, for sure. I don't know if you've ever been in Mexico, but I'm here in one of the most iconic places in our country, which is the archaeological site of Chichén Itzá. Maybe you don't know much about this place, or maybe you don't know much about the Maya. One of the things I think you're learning probably in your social studies soon is going to be about other cultures of the world. The Maya from Mexico and Central America is one of the most important people in history, especially on this side of the world. As you guys know, maybe you have heard that Native Americans, First Nations, as you call them there, they were spread all over the continent, through North America to South America. We're learning about all these different people that just have different traditions before the Europeans came here to this side of the world. They were here, and some of them got to be very sophisticated. So today we are learning about this great building that we have here in the back. This temple, guys, is known in two different names. First, number one, it's called the castle. Why do you think it's called the castle? Well, this is a story that we gotta go back in time to 1535. Let me show you with the other perspective. How does it look? Can you guys take a look? So this building, my friends, was first spotted by the first European in 1550s. At least is the first person that starts talking about it. This big building, guys, is 100 feet tall. As you guys can see, pretty tall. You can spot the size of the people there in the bottom. Well, this building, the castle, was named by the first Catholic friar. So this guy's name was Diego de Landa, and Diego de Landa was the first bishop of Yucatan. He was in charge of teaching everybody in Mexico about Catholicism and learning about Jesus. So, but everybody was listening to this guy, but everybody had a different religion, right? Back in the day, the local people believed in different gods, including gods of nature. So all the different, I would say, powers of nature or forces of nature, including the sun, of course, rain, the wind. It's very important. And something they worship a lot was farming, and that even included the farming gods, as the corn god, for example, or other gods that were related to fertility. So there in the back, guys, let me show you. That's the temple of the warriors, and we are here on this big plaza that is known as the Plaza Norte. Okay, Plaza Norte, North Plaza. But anyway, let's go back to the subject. We're here. The castle was named by the first Spanish Catholic priest that came here to the Yucatan, and then they call it like that. So they name it the castle for many years. Events, like I told you, even from 1550s. Now, something that is very important when we talk about this building is that then it was dedicated to mainly two different deities, so two different gods. Let me turn this again. So give it a look, my kids. Okay, we're gonna get closer and we're gonna see this is the main facade, the main face of the building. If you guys can see, there's all the sun, it's right behind us, but now you can see it much better. Look at the size of this great building. Now, there's another name now we call this building too. Let me show you. Here's the stairs. And here by the stairs, we can spot these two big heads of snakes. Can you guys see it? Say yes in the comments. Can you guys see this? Give it a look. Can you spot that? Those are the of course, the tongues rolling down. You know how we roll our R's in Spanish. Okay, and you can see also something important. These snakes are actually feathered. They don't have scales in their skin, but they have feathers. This is the reason why we call this temple the Temple of Kukulkan. Okay, you gotta repeat that. You gotta remember this. Kukulkan. This means the feathered snake. Feather snake. Well, what does a feather snake has to do with this building? Well, this symbol of a feather snake actually represents something that comes from heaven. So it's a very important symbol here. A snake, it's a representation of wisdom. It's a representation of fertility for the local indigenous people here. So they would worship this feather snake god in multiple ways. One of them was first making representations of the snake in multiple ways, in multiple spots, and there's two of these snakes. We understand they were the creators of the world. Okay, so I need to tell you the story so you guys understand why they remember these two snakes. So listen up and pay attention. This story, it's on a book that is called the Popol Vuh. The Popol Vuh, it's a book that was written by some old priest in 1500s, and now we can read this story. And so in the beginning of the story, we learned that there wasn't anything in the world. There was nothing in the world. No earth, there's no ground, there's nothing, just water, completely motionless water. And there was also just completely darkness in the sky. So there was no sun, no moon, no stars, okay? Nothing. So the story mentions how in the beginning there were, above the waters, there were two snake gods that were flying. These two snake gods didn't have just scales like I mentioned before. They were feathered. So they were like birds, right? But they were snakes. They were snakes. So the story mentions these two gods were flying above the waters, and once they were flying, they were talking that they needed to create the world. So they were mentioning, they're discussing in a way that they needed to create the world. And in this conversation, they said that they needed to first bring the dry land. So from the bottom of the sea, they brought the dry land to emerge from the bottom, and that's how they created the dry land. So this dry land many times is represented as a turtle or an actual crocodile. So this is important. Now the two feather snakes kept discussing, let's create now the vegetation. So they created the vegetation, and one of the big trees that they actually made was this tree, guys. Let me show you. This right here is known as the ceiba tree, okay? So the ceiba tree is representing by these powerful roots. Look at that. So you see the roots, kids? So the roots are representing the connection to the bottom world. This bottom world or underworld is known here in Yucatan as the Mignal, or in other places they call it Xibalba. Now, the upper world, though, the upper world is represented by the big branches. So as you saw the branches there, once again, these branches, they say, connect to the spiritual world above. So what is it representing is basically the connection to the three different layers that the Maya would say exist in the world. You know how we got on Earth, but they believe there was an upper world and there's also an underworld. This is super important when we talk about the Maya. Anyway, so the story mentions about that they created the vegetation and the dry land, vegetation. Then the animals were also placed in the world, such animals as the jaguars and the fox and the coyotes and the parrots and the raccoons. And there's all these different animals that we have in this jungle, as you guys know, the deer, of course. So the gods created the animals, but then they weren't happy. They needed to create now men. Now, men were first made out of clay, and these clay people were too soft. They're too muddy, really, really muddy. And when they got wet, they actually got dissolved because they were too soft. So they didn't work. The second time they actually tried to make the people with wood. Wooden people were a lot stronger. The problem with the wooden people is that these wooden people were now too rigid. Too rigid, they didn't have any feelings, they have no heart and soul. And this is the reason, my friends, that the gods didn't like these guys, because they didn't worship. So they didn't talk to them, they didn't nurture the gods. And this is basically why they got rid of the wooden people by sending a flood. So it was a flood, a big rain, a big storm that destroyed the second humanity. Now, this is super important, guys. We had a problem now. We have an issue because the gods needed to make the people for the third time some worshippers. They wanted worshippers, and these men were not good for that. So something important that we learned is that they're looking for a new material that needed to be like not as strong, not as hard, but also not as soft. So they needed something in between. They couldn't find a new material for doing that. So let me tell you what happened in the story. There we got the building. Look at this view, kids. So continuing with the story, it mentions that they're looking for new material. So they ask a couple of twin brothers that were their helpers, let's go find a new material. So with this new material, they were looking for something, in between, like I explained you before, and they couldn't find anything. So what they did was, just going hunting and looking on the jungle. Maybe they could find something. These guys were two ball players. I don't know if you ever heard about the ball game. Have you heard about the ball game? Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But the story mentions that they like to play with a rubber ball. I don't know if you have seen a rubber ball from the Maya. There's a tree that they would collect, where they would cut and they would collect the sap from this tree. So this rubber ball was a rubber ball was very bouncy. I will show you one. Sukun, ¿me dejas usar la pelota? Look at this. These friends. Here is a rubber ball, kids. You see it? Okay, I want you to spot this. Did you look? This ball was bouncy, and this ball needed to be passed. They were bouncing the ball from side to side, okay? Why do they have feathers? Why do they have feathers? I'm reading this. The snakes have feathers because they are celestial snakes. They are gods. No, that wasn't concrete. That wasn't concrete. The rubber balls were the sap from the tree, okay? So they're cooking the sap, and then they were getting, a rubber ball like that. So anyway, the important part here. I want to show you this because this is super important. Okay, the rubber ball was used to play. And in the story, we learned that the twin brothers are bouncing the ball from side to side, okay? And they're making a lot of noise because these balls were so heavy. So they're making a lot of noise. And remember how there's an upper world? Well, there's also an underworld. What does that mean? Well, there are lords of heaven, but they're also lords of death in the bottom. Okay, so in the story, we learn that the ball was bouncing and making too much noise in the ground that the lords of death got so upset with this noise above their heads. It was bouncing every time, pook, pook. So they demanded that these twin brothers would go down through the caves to meet up the gods of the death world. So these guys went down to the death world to have a battle against these lords of death. So they went with their ball and they started bouncing, the ball from side to side. Many of these friends, we have here a rubber ball. Let me show you another one. Like these guys have another one. Sukun, go on this. You see? They're soft. They're not rocks. You see? That bounces well. All right. Now, let me show you where. Gracias, chicos. Now, let me show you where they play this game. So they started representing this story that they would go down to the death world, remember? So they battle in the story. The twin brothers, listen to these names, Xbalanque and Hunapu, they battle against the lords of death. These lords of death make it very hard for them. But at the end, the twin brothers overcome death. And they become the heroes, or because they defeated the lords of death. And they chopped their heads off. Okay? They decapitated the lords of death. They also chopped their bodies in little pieces. And that's how they became honored. And they become, when they resurrect back to life, because they exit the lords of death, the underworld, then is when they were transformed. Listen, remember the two snakes? There's one there. Okay, let's go back and let's take a look. Here's one, look. Okay, you see one of the snakes? Do you see these long stripes? These are feathers. You see the quill right there? And if we keep going, here at the bottom, here at the very end, take a look. We have the tail. So there is the rattle. That's the rattle right there. You see? And there's a big snake. And on the other side, there's the other snake. You see it? Okay. Excelente. So, my friends, at the end, these twin brothers defeated the lords of death. They overcome death, and then they resurrected back to life. Once they resurrected back to life, then they became the sun and the moon. And it's from that moment that we have light, and we have basically fertility on the ground, and that's when the corn god actually resurrects back to life. And the corn god made the corn growing. So white corn and yellow corn was grown, and from corn, the gods decided on using this as a new material to create humans. So this is super important, kids. The Maya believed that their first fathers, the third humanity, was made out of corn. That's really important. And then they play this representation of the ball in this place. Let me show you. You see this big stadium? Do you guys like Harry Potter, kids? This is the original Quidditch right there. Take a look. You see those rings? One side and then the other side. You see it over there. So these represents the east and the west, the life and death, darkness and light. So this is the big stadium there on that upper temple. That's where the ruler was observing at the game. And I want to show you what happened with the person that apparently lost the game. This is carved on the stones, so you guys can understand the battle. So look, Here's a ball, big ball right here. You see it? And then there is a person on this side that is on one knee, but it's also decapitated. As you guys can spot here, there's blood coming from his neck in the representations of snakes. So this guy is bleeding, is decapitated, and then from his head there is a plant that is growing over here. You can see some of the flowers, and these flowers are blooming. And this is because blood is representing fertility. Now, as you guys can see on this side, there's this person from this other team. He actually he's holding with one hand the decapitated head of this other person. Now, there is 2 teams of 7 players each. Okay, that's what you see on these panels. Anyway, my friends, so kids, I invite you to come and learn more about the Maya civilization. This is one of the very important places that you can come here in Mexico and you can visit. You know, it's not too far away from Cancun. Coming to Chichén Itzá is great. You know, you can learn about these ancient people that lived in this part of the world. Because remember something, before Europeans, Spaniards, British, French, German, before they came, there was people living in this land already. They were advanced in many ways. They were sophisticated. They were people that were doing all different kinds of constructions, and they have already a civilization that sometimes it's overlooked. So that's very important. Here it is, guys, another view from the temple of Kukulkan, or the castle. Here we have the place that represents the underworld, and over there is the place that represents the upper world. Okay? Well, I don't know if you have any other questions, my friends. Kiddos, Mr. Caesar, how do you play this sport? How do you win? That's a great question. Well, remember, this isn't sport. This is just a representation of the battle that happened in the death world. But if you want to see it as a sport, because there were 2 teams on each, each team 7 against 7, they mostly, or usually, they played with their joints, the harder joints of their body. Because remember, their elbows, their knees, and mainly their hips was the most common part of their bodies used to hit the ball with. Okay, now the ball is just too heavy, so they shouldn't kick it. They shouldn't use their heads, and you shouldn't just use their hands either. It was just such a heavy ball, maybe 3, 4, or even 8 pounds heavy. Sometimes they're very heavy, so they're usually only use their hips. Can you imagine passing the ball through those rings over there? This is a good question. So they were mainly hitting the ball with their hips. So that would be the answer. The other thing they were using, something like a racket. Here on the panels, we can see this guy, I think, very well. I want you to see this guy. Can you see it? Okay. To see how this guy is holding this. That's like a square with the face of a snake. You see that? Okay, now look at the other guy. He's also holding that. Every single player has the same artifact on the hand. You see this? Here it is again. There it is again. This one, it's over there, even though it's almost broken. There it is. And then there's this guy that was decapitated. Here he has it. So yeah, they're using artifacts like this to play the ball. I mean, hit the ball. So this, by the way, was built around 900 AD, and it was in use until 1200 AD. The whole plaza has the date. Okay, so all the plaza has the same age. It's basically the prime of Chichén Itzá. So one of the things they say that it would happen during those years between 900 AD, so 900 years after Christ, to 1200 years after Christ. That is at least 800 years ago, right? Okay. So after the game, as you guys can see, the buildings, all these buildings here, they would do decapitation. So some of the players would get decapitated, and here is where they were presenting the skulls. So I want to show you the skulls. Take a look. It's this platform right here is known as the rack of skulls. Can you see? Every single one is just different. All these people were apparently decapitated, and they were presenting to the gods on this platform. So the priest would present the head there, and that was a way of intimidation. All right, because remember something, these people, like any other people in human history, they were a lot into war, a lot into trading, a lot into religion, a lot into different economical activities. So they were busy all the time, and they're always making sure their city was looking good and also was in a way impressive for the visitors. So people could get sometimes even intimidated by what these guys did. Here is an example of how everything was pretty detailed. Look, here's another example. Chambers like this with full decoration. And I want you to see also that the whole city was colorful. So you guys can spot there some red color, some blue colors. So the whole, all the buildings were pretty painted, decorated, full of details, as you guys can spot here. Mainly warriors, gods, politicians were usually represented, and they were painted in blue, red, and white colors. So all these stairs were the stairs to go to the upper part, okay, and see the game from the top, or the ceremony from the top. And then they were sitting in those stairs, and they were looking at the presentation of the skulls in that other platform. So these side kits, all that side kits is a representation of the death world. Okay, remember, death world, underworld, or in Maya, Mignal or Xibalba. And the temple over there is the opposite. That means going to heaven. That represents a mountain that takes us higher to the sun god, the rain god, and other gods that live on the upper world. Well, I hope that more or less this helps you guys understand. All this big plaza was meant to do ceremonies. By the way, nobody lived here in all this area. All the plaza was for mainly gatherings, was for social activities, was for performing different rituals and political events, and even military activity. But it wasn't really an area where people were living. So people were living outside of this city center. So all the city center is mainly focused on religious events, okay? Political events, and now this is where people gathers for looking at the representation of light at the equinoxes. So I'm just gonna finish with these kids. Let me show you once again this main building, okay? Now what is special about this building is not just that it's big, but this building is actually representing the sun calendar. Okay, so let me explain you how and why exactly. So as you guys know, the Maya follow the sun and they have a sun calendar. So the sun calendar, remember, we have a 12-month calendar of 30 days each. In this case, the Maya have a 18-month calendar, okay, of 20 days each. So it was 20 months of 20 days. That makes 360 days in total, all right? Now we're missing 5 days in the end, at the end of the year, and that was at 365. So they had a 365-day cycle just like us, and this cycle, it's been active. I mean, this Maya calendar was in use for more than 2,000 years. So it's very important we understand these guys use it much before us. Okay, now these guys have their calendar. 1 month was 20 days, right? So every month there was a ceremony, and if you guys count the amount of platforms there are on this building, you can start checking and counting. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 at the very top. So there are 9 platforms on each side. So that means that in this side of the stairs there's 9, and on the other side of the stairs there's other 9. So this represents these 9, and these 9 are representing the 18 months of the solar calendar. Meanwhile, to go to the very top, guys, there are 91 steps. 91 steps on each side. 91 steps on each side. That makes 91 and 91 and 91 and 91. That makes 364. 364 plus the upper step to go to the top of the building. That makes 365 steps. So this represents the cycle of the sun, the solar year. So this is super important, you guys know. And it was aligned in a way that in the equinoxes, the building projection, the light that was projected on this end was even ending on this set of stairs, guys, that you have there, where you have the snake. I'll have to send Mr. Caesar. I'll have to send him a couple of pictures. So this is what happens on the equinox. Okay, on the equinox, the light projects on this end, and then part of the light goes to the other end, where you see now the snake head at the other side. Do you see that? So this is how a snake of light is projected from this corner to that other corner. So this creates triangles coming from the top and creating a snake of light all the way to the bottom. So this was at the end of the year. This was a ceremony that everybody was gathered here, and it was a very, very important event, a big important religious event that was just part of these guys' traditions and ideas, and this was a way of controlling even the population by the high important class. So they were converting everybody into their religion by observing how the snake god was coming from heaven in a shape of triangles of light, forming a snake at the bottom. I'll send that picture, or even if you have a chance of checking that up, you'll see it as Chichén Itzá equinox. This is an effect that only happens for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 times a year. On the equinox, that means at the 21st, around 21st of March and 21st of September, beginning and end of farming season. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this quick visit to Mexico, and I hope you learn a few things today. I don't know if you have maybe some more comments or more questions. You probably do, but we already, I don't know if you have a lot more time. We got already 34 minutes. Let me know, Jared, please. So here we are on the temple of Kukulkan. I think I'm gonna say goodbye. Well, it was my pleasure being on. Oh yeah, one more question. Okay, I can't read it. Yes. What's that? Let me know. Let me know. One more question. There's always questions about this place. What is that question, Jared? Let me know. Why did they sacrifice people? Okay, that is a good question. Um, there is this common idea, and it's probably the most common idea, that people needed to feed the gods in a way that they could be nurture, fed, because the Maya gods were not necessarily almighty. So they have this concept of that they have to give life in order to receive life. So these guys are expecting good rainy season. They're expecting good crops. They're expecting good harvest, right? And good healthy children. You know, the newborns, so their life can continue and their society can continue. So it's very important that they get enough food for everybody, and they ask for this all this fertility and all this food, all this corn and squash and beans and avocados and tomatoes and peanuts that they love, um, and these salsas that they made and all these tacos that they have, because they are the first taco eaters. Let me tell you that. So they needed that, and in order to receive that, they needed to pay a tribute. Sometimes it was blood offerings, and they believe that blood is the life giver. So it's through blood that you need to request for more life. So sometimes it was just a few drop offerings, blood offerings of your own blood. Sometimes it was by piercing your earrings or your tongue, I mean, your ears or your tongue or something like that. Or sometimes it was something more complex, maybe offering a jaguar, maybe a turkey, sometimes a deer. You know, that's like the common offerings when it comes to animal. And this was a common thing, not just in here, it was a common thing in many other ancient civilizations. They were offering blood as part of the gods' feeding. And at the end of the day, here, they also scale it to do human offerings. So just like in other parts of the world, they did also human offerings. And this is a way they were feeding the gods. This was the way how how they at the end, that's how they keep going with life. They maintain certain balance. They hope that the gods are happy. That's part of the answer of why these people were doing all these offerings. Good. Any other question, kids? Let me know. I can't really read the messages from Instagram, Jared. No, thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you guys for, I hope you had a good audio. I had a microphone with me so you guys could listen well. You are wonderful. Thank you very much for you guys' questions. Hopefully it was a good video for you, and informative and everything. I think this place is just fantastic. This place is definitely worth it to visit. You guys have a chance of ever coming to this part of Mexico. This is in a place called Yucatan. We are in the Yucatan Peninsula in the state of Yucatan. So if you guys come next time with your parents, don't forget that this one, it's a wonder of the world. So definitely it's amazing to come and visit. So I'm going to say goodbye here. Thank you very much, guys. Maybe see you next time. Maybe see you on another episode of Visiting Mexico. See you guys. Bye.